Hello， Cypher Money 的观众朋友，大家好。今天呢，我们非常的荣幸呢，邀请到了 NEAR Protocol 的 CEO Ilya。Welcome to Cypher Money.
Hi, yeah, thanks for inviting me.
所以呢，我们今天会稍微跟大家聊一下关于 NEAR Protocol 最近的状况，以及我们收集来的一些我们观众的一些问题。Okay, so the first question for NEAR Protocol is: we know the phase one of the NEAR Protocol mainnet has launched at 22 April, and it goes well so far. And what's the next?
Yeah, so the whole point was to launch kind of proof of authority network first is to do a few things. The main one is actually test that everything works correctly.
Yeah.
And so far it's been running well. We've been testing it as well as kind of letting all the tools be able to integrate with it. And the next stage of it is actually onboarding all the validators from around the world to run the network. Right, so in parallel, we've been running the incentivized testnet, where we have about like 200-300 people, professional validators as well as kind of enthusiasts, running the nodes and testing everything. And so we're doing final checks with them right now. So we're doing a lot of stress testing and making sure that if there's a hotfix or some possible security issue, we can roll it out quickly and they will update and pretty much fix the issue. So as soon as all of those checks kind of go through, we'll start onboarding them on the mainnet. So this plan obviously is in shift and by end of July. And so this will be kind of marking the stage where the network is actually fully decentralized, right? They're run by people from China, Europe, US, South America, everywhere. From there, what we'll have validators now are able to vote for unlocking transfers. And so as soon as they vote, that will showcase that this is actually a fully decentralized network governed by this community, right? So it's not governed by a team that built it, but actually governed by community. And that actually kind of launches it fully into its own right.
The next question is there any special things on the phase 2?
Yeah, so there's like a few things that coming in, but one of the main features, which we also will start building up a lot of other functionality on top, is a fully functioning bridge between Ethereum and NEAR. So usually when people build bridges like Proof of Authority bridge, POA bridge, or some others, usually they maintain kind of multi-sig of folks, and pretty much that governs the money, like WBTC or TBTC, all of them operate in one way. So we actually implemented a fully trustless bridge, which verifies security of both chains and pretty much provides kind of like security of both chains when you transfer assets or do function calls. What it allows us to do is really kind of launch this, and it will be operated and governed again by the consensus of Ethereum and NEAR. And going forward, this allows you to move all the assets between the chains, right? So you can actually move any ERC20 or Ethereum from the Ethereum network to NEAR, and actually you can move NEAR or any NEAR assets back to Ethereum. So this provides kind of full interoperability, as well as specifically for NEAR contracts, it will be reasonably straightforward to build a functionality where you can call a contract on Ethereum and get a call back. And this is because NEAR contracts are designed, it allows to have this callback functionality really easily.
I think that is the first projects to do that in the blockchain industry. Yeah.
So in specifically this way, yes. There's been a lot of work obviously in the space. I mean, like Cosmos IBC, Polkadot have been working on bridges. We also based a lot of work on Hyper network work. Specifically, this design was like kind of versatility of functionality. So far, we haven't seen anything like that yet.
Okay, so I can move all the ERC20 assets to the NEAR Protocol mainnet phase 2.
Yeah.
大家要注意一下，这个是一个非常重要的功能不管是对于 NEAR 来说，那或者是对于Ethereum 的扩展来说，这应该都是一个非常大的要进，这应该是第一条可以做到这件事情的公链。Okay, so next question is about the NEAR Protocol economics. Is that good for the developers, or what's the special for the NEAR Protocol economics?
Sure, yeah. So when we were designing economics, we were trying to optimize actually for, in a way, like 3 different major roles in the network, right? So you have validators, right? The people who provide kind of hardware security. You have people like developers who build contracts, and you have users who are actually using all this, right? So in all 3 roles kind of need to work together and actually make sense, right? And so the way we kind of engineered it is really to kind of give each one of them some aspect of kind of usability and predictability, and then allow all of this function around kind of the same token, right? So let me describe kind of high level of this. So for validators, we actually allocating a predictable kind of security fee, which ends up being like annualized, let's say 4.5% on top of their stake. So if you stake, $1 million NEAR, you'll get 4.5% on top of it at the end of the year. Well, to be specific, 4.5% of total supply, so it depends on how much is staked. The more staked, the less kind of yield you get, and the other way, the less is staked, the actually better return, which will lead to more people wanting to stake until it finds a balance where kind of enough people stake and provide security for the return that they find appropriate. So this is kind of one side, and it's in a way decoupled from how like transaction fees are done. From our perspective, transaction fees are really more designed to fit transactions into block, not actually incentivize validators or miners. Even in Bitcoin right now, which the whole goal of it is transaction fees actually covering the block, it's still only like 5% of the block reward transaction fee. Even after halving, it's actually very interesting. So in our case, we actually burn transaction fees. So the more transaction happens on the system, the more NEAR is being burned, which actually, in a way offsets what we give to validators. It's fully decoupled, right? So validators give their reward independently of what's happening on the network. So it's predictable for them, independent of what's going on. And then all the transaction fees are burned. And what this allows to do, in theory, right, if this network is really used, it actually will offset and maybe start burning more than validators are paid. Now, we all know that like the kind of transaction fee markets, what Ethereum and Bitcoin have, are actually really hard to use for users and developers, right? It's really like unpredictable, the price can spike. So we actually kind of took the design that Vitalik was publishing, this kind of flexible adjusting rate for the gas price. And so we implemented that with like a few tweaks. And so this allows to kind of, as a network gets busier, right, the price is actually kind of increasing like somewhat smoothly, right? So this is really helpful as a user. You can look at what the price curve is and decide if you want to participate or not. Find also the balance, because right now, like because the market's like it's an auction, right? You never know what the next block's auction would look like. So this also means that like kind of because we built a sharded system, and one of the core components of sharded system in NEAR is actually ability to rescale the network, right? So because the way we build sharding, which is very different from like other folks in the industry, we actually can increase number of shards dynamically and rebalance contracts between them. So as let's say the load for the network increases, let's say there's a CryptoKitties, or like compound and balancer, everybody yield mining, and it's really becoming busy. Well, what's going to happen is in 24 hours, network, like the protocol, will observe the usage and will actually increase the capacity. It will add number of shards and rebalance some of the contracts to kind of redistribute the load. And which means is that at that point, the price will go down again, because now you have more capacity in the network. So it's as if your block size was growing in like Ethereum or Bitcoin, right? As you got more usage, like in a way you can think of it that way. And which means the price will actually be like stabilizing, right? So like on the long run, this allows to stabilize the price, and in the short term, like within an hour, try to have like kind of smoother curve that allows you to really predict what's going on. So that's kind of the user side in a way. And then developer side, which is actually really hard to optimize for developers because there's so many different types of developers and they interact differently. So, but the important part actually is related to kind of economics of the resources, right? So the network at the end is still kind of has resources and they need to be paid. So Ethereum and Bitcoin have this kind of state explosion, right? This is where, for example, USDT contract taking 100 megabytes worth of space into Ethereum, and they're not really paying for that 100 megabytes. I mean, even though actually USDT is very transactional, like has a lot of transactions in smart contract, but like they're not paying really kind of for the securing of this 100 megabytes. Even more, let's say I store 100 megabytes once and then just don't touch it again until later, right? I'm not paying for store, like I'm paid it to store once, but I'm not paying it continuously. So this is the idea where there's kind of two approaches that people have tried, right? So one is kind of some kind of RAM or storage, right? So this is what EO is doing and a few others. And the other approach is state rent.
State rent.
So we actually implemented state rent originally. And we tried to use it, and it was actually very complicated for users and developers.
It's super complicated.
Yeah, because you really, when you see your balance going down, it's a very, very weird event. And it's going down because you're using storage and it's charging you. So we decided to actually go a little bit different approach where it is, we call it the minimum balance. So let's say your contract takes 10 kilobytes of space on the blockchain. So you need to maintain a minimum balance of 1 NEAR on your account to take this space. So if you have 1 NEAR and you try to withdraw some money, send some money to somebody, it will fail because, hey, you need to have 1 NEAR minimum. And as, let's say, your contract grows, right, you need to maintain larger minimum balance, right? So for USDT, for example, it will need to maintain like 10,000 NEAR minimum balance. So the way it works is pretty much, this is a NEAR that is not staked or lent, which means like in a way the inflation of NEAR, like what we're paying to the validator is kind of paying for the storage, right? So in a way we're using the inflation that we're paying already to validators to kind of offset the cost of the storage. The interesting other side of this is that because we are a sharded network, as actually usage of the space grows, we also increase the capacity, right? So we increase number of shards, which means, let's say we, like right now, Ethereum had already over 100 gigabytes, and the storage, like access in general becomes super slow. Because actually the limitations of networks right now are really around storage, like actually reading data from disk. And so our kind of right now, at least benchmarking showed that at about 100 gigabytes of storage, the performance degrades pretty dramatically. So the idea is each shard will maintain about storage, and then if there's more storage, we'll just increase number of shards. Right? So we can actually shard the space and storage and allow to store more data, and also this will cover kind of more security and for more validators, right? So it's like naturally aligns incentives for more validators to provide kind of more storage for the network. So it's a complicated story, but we actually have a blog post and a paper kind of explaining all the details. I encourage people to check out. And actually one more thing that we're doing for developers, I forgot it. So we also, if you're a developer and you build a contract, right? And you have some amount of transactions going through it, this contract actually receives 30% of all of the transaction fees and accumulates to the contract or to the subcontract it calls. What this allows to do, like in a lot of cases, some people build kind of like low-level protocols or libraries which don't have a good business model, right? They're not touching users, so they're not actually receiving any income, right? So this way allows to the contract itself to earn, in a way, some NEAR, and this NEAR can be used for various things. It can be paid to developer, right? It can be maybe there's a token that issued, and it can use this NEAR to buy this token and burn this token, right? So it can create business models around the contract itself. So this is actually like really trying to build like few different business models, both on the contract level and the protocol level, as well as kind of user level, to allow developers to build businesses.
The next question is, we know there's a lot of DeFi dApps on top of Ethereum, and there's a lot of security problems. And what's your thought about this problems, and what's the solution on NEAR protocol?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say like there's a silver bullet solution. Like security is hard, and I think there's kind of few things that we're trying to help kind of developers with security. So one is our kind of language that we support by default. So we run like smart contracts run inside WebAssembly. So WebAssembly is like this generic virtual machine, and it has a lot of compilers, right? That can compile to it. So we support right now AssemblyScript, which is a TypeScript language compiler, and Rust. And we believe Rust is actually provides you better security guarantees than Solidity, right? And like, all those interesting bugs that people had with just Solidity, like wrong Solidity code, right? Like people forgot to initialize variables, like some registry stuff, etc. So Rust in general, Rust itself is a verified, like, security reviewed and verified language and compiler, and the standard library is also like very well tested and verified. And on top of it, like the language itself provides a lot of guarantees that you can leverage. But this is not usually enough. A lot of kind of recent hacks coming from interaction, right, from composability. And I wouldn't say we actually have a good solution right now, but we've been doing some kind of research and thinking in this space, and we have some ideas. One of them actually so we have NEAR enhancement proposals. So we have a proposal around what we call safes. So safe is this idea that allows to pretty much package some assets and resources and then add some conditions. And for example, let's say you want to do a trade, right? And you will say, hey, I have, this much DAI and I want to get this much NEAR, right? So you want to trade DAI for NEAR. Well, so usually you would call an exchange contract, right? And it will return you, like you would call it as DAI, it will return you NEAR, and you will not validate any of this kind of properties, right? You'll just get how much you got. And it's possible that you got nothing, like usually you don't check. So there's some smart contracts in Ethereum already doing this types of properties where they check that you got actually the amount you were expecting. So 1inch is a good example. Their top level contract actually computes properties first, and then when they send a transaction, they check that you got the amount you were expecting. And so this allows them to add actually non-security reviewed contracts on the other side, like exchanges that are not security reviewed yet, because they know that they will invalidate transaction. So we want to put this as like a almost a protocol level like concept where you can pretty much say, hey, I have this amount of asset, and after calling some other contracts, I will expect this specific properties, and if not, then we need to roll back. So we call it safes, and pretty much it like packages them in a safe and make sure that it's safe at the end. And so I think this kind of ideas, and it's not just us, there's other people thinking about this in the space. Boric has some interesting ideas on this as well. So I think this will help a lot with kind of securing smart contracts, because I think this composability where you don't know what the other contract actually does, and when you're calling it, you cannot rely, even if it says ERC20, you cannot realize that it is actually ERC20, right? I mean, that's what we had before. You cannot realize that there will not be some other change because of some other contract that will mess up this contract, right? And that's what all these hackers are finding, right? I change in the swap here, I'll put it here, and then this contract will fail, right?
Yeah.
So we really need kind of some properties on a transaction level or on asset level actually, where ideally you would even let's say you have a liquidity pool, you say, hey, I'll put this money in the liquidity pool, and these properties need to apply going forward. If they don't, then return me the money because this liquidity pool is trying to kind of fail me, right? So really, in a way, you're kind of programming assets now, not just writing generic code, which really changes a little bit the paradigm, but I think it's very valuable for DeFi, financial applications in general, which are kind of booming right now.
Okay, so last question, that is, we all know that it's very difficult for the new blockchains to attract more good application onto the NEAR protocol or something. What's your plan? And do you expect some special use case that we can use on the NEAR protocol?
So in general, NEAR is a generic platform, right? So even now we have everything from prediction markets, some different game stuff, payout, games itself, marketplaces, to things like social network. We're working with some music stuff. So the space of the kind of use cases is pretty generic and pretty wide. The way I think of it is there's how you use blockchain, in which application. I think this is very generic, right? I think the space is moving in the direction where kind of all of the applications will be one way or another interacting with blockchain and using blockchain for kind of financial payment, all of this asset, kind of financial use cases, which before we would use centralized finance. So I think in this case, the case is what is done on a smart contract, what protocols you build. I think there is realistically will have a very, at least in the beginning, very fixed set of use cases, right? And that's what we see right now. The actual use cases that people use it is, some kind of token issuance, some kind of tracking, and kind of provenance attachment, right? Even if you use it, provenance attachment can be used for music and can be used for, enterprise, right? But the actual contract is very similar.
Yeah.
Right? So we have this set of DAOs, some tokens, NFTs, etc., which kind of and marketplaces, obviously, as low level, we call it components, right? Those are I wish there was more, but right now we have a pretty fixed set across the space. It's not just us. And then I think where it's used is pretty global. We also, through the bridge, right, ask how to bootstrap this. I think that's a very good question, because right now if you launch a new network, right, it's empty, and this is network effect networks, right? So really when anybody looks at an empty network, they're well, why would I come? Because it's empty, right? Nobody's else there. So really bootstrapping is an important part, and this is where the bridge I mentioned before is a crucial part, right? Because now we connect to Ethereum and we allow anybody who builds a NEAR to directly interact with everything that's in Ethereum, including all of the exchanges and all of the other tooling that exists, right?
Yeah.
You can actually, even if you issue an asset on NEAR, you will still have an ERC20 on Ethereum kind of mirroring it, or NFT mirroring it, which means you can go directly to maybe listed, etc., without waiting until all of the tooling will kind of build up on NEAR. It will take time naturally for kind of to catch up. So that's a huge important part. And then because you can interact still with the contracts, which means you can build a lot of of this tooling. And the benefit is, right, even for right now for financial applications that we've seen, right, the prices on Ethereum are crazy, right? I mean, I don't know, instant yeah. So the benefit is right now is that we have very kind of affordable, cheap, fractions of cents prices that are here, and you can still interact with assets and you move them back and forth. Yeah. So even for simple things like automated market maker, if you want to swap some tokens, something very simple, you already can use NEAR, because you move your tokens, swap them, and move them back yeah, the time to transaction you need to wait for finality, but you need to wait for finality on Ethereum anyway.
Yeah.
So, and here you get like way cheaper prices. So there's already a huge benefit of like launching some of the original application, and then from there, obviously this is already not an empty network, there's already some ecosystem. Then from there we can build up more and more of like generic use cases that we see.
Yeah, because you guys have a lot of grants and plans and alliance programs, a lot of things. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so we have plenty of different ways to support and grow community.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously the goal is to build kind of self-sustainable community. And so one of the kind of dimensions, right, is we have kind of direct contributors, right? So it's people who either contribute to the protocol itself, to the kind of tooling, to maybe building some of the like blog posts describing how it all works, etc. Right? So this is a contributor program, been running for a while now. We have really good contributors who kind of building up ecosystem. And the idea is to kind of like in a way we all becoming contributors, right? That's like the whole team is just contributors as with these guys. At the same time, what kind of the way really we're seeing the community will scale, right, is through other communities, right? So that's why we have this thing called Guild program, where really it's all about other community leaders who have their existing communities and interested in growing them, as well as kind of figuring out maybe ways to organize events or organize some activities around this, right? So, and this also like in the like maybe there's like first like few apps launched on NEAR, the people in the community can go use them, etc. So there's like a lot of kind of incentive programs around that. And then the flip side of this, we really believe in founders. We really believe in startups. And because of this, we have this program called, or this kind of community now, which is called Open Web Collective. So Open Web Collective, it started as kind of a community of founders. And the idea was that us being in Silicon Valley and now actually around the world, we have a lot of resources to connect founders to investors, to like resources like, banking, to like one of our investors' idea, right, was design and kind of like design thinking. We learned ourselves a lot about like token economics and go to market in this space, so wanted to kind of help this. So we have a lot of kind of really want to help these folks, and we saw that this is a need, right? Like we had a lot of founders coming to us and say, hey, I'm a really good developer, I can build whatever, but I really don't know how to get to user. So we started this community to just help, like, and let people help each other. And then now it actually transformed into a kind of accelerated program where we have a batch of 9 companies working together through this program, gaining usage, gaining kind of traction, and then they'll go and fundraise kind of from this network of investors. And so we're planning to scale it up, and we super welcome people joining this community first, and then if sees fit, they'll kind of transfer to this accelerated program.
Okay, really looking forward for the next of the NEAR Protocol and the phase 2 something.
Yeah.
Okay. 今天谢谢 Ilya 到我们在 For Money 的节目，然后来跟大家说一下最新的 NEAR Protocol 的进度，以及他们即将要主网的下一个阶段。We hope we can have another very good talks next time. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, 谢谢，
拜拜。
拜拜。